I've spent most of my 45 years talking with my fists, my bike, or my silence. Words were never my strong suit. But the day I met Fletcher Dane, the lawyer who was supposed to help me keep my daughter, words became weapons. Dangerous ones, quiet ones, the kind that cut deeper than knives if you weren't paying attention. He walked into the Iron Serpent's bar like he owned air itself. Polished shoes stepping over old beer stains, expensive coat brushing against leather vests patched and earned with blood. He wasn't scared. That was the first red flag. Any man who isn't afraid in a room full of bikers is either stupid or he's hiding something sharp behind his back. I'd hired him because the people told me he was the best. And maybe he was, if the best meant a man who could smile while drawing blood. My custody battle for my daughter, Mia, had eaten through my savings like gasoline on concrete. My ex wanted full custody for Mia's safety. Yeah, safety. Funny word coming from a woman who used to beg me not to leave the club because she liked how the patches made her feel. But judges like safety, and lawyers like Fletcher know how to polish that word till it blinds people. He sat opposite me at a scarred oak table, folded his hands neatly, and gave me a grin that felt rehearsed. Too symmetrical, too practiced, like a blade sharpened every morning. Elias, he said, your past is colorful. We'll need to get ahead of that. Colorful. Another pretty word for violent, chaotic criminal. He said it like he was admiring a painting. I didn't trust him, not from the first second. But trust wasn't something I had the luxury to demand. I needed someone who spoke the language of courts and lies. Someone who could turn my broken history into something the judge might see as repairable. Just tell me what I gotta do, I growled. I want my daughter, that's it. He nodded politely, like I'd ordered a drink. Everything will depend on how cooperative you're willing to be. Another red flag. Words like cooperative in the mouth of a man like him meant submission. Still, I let him talk. Let him list all the ways he'd helped me. Let him ask questions about my club, my past, the nights that ended with sirens or worse. He said it was necessary for strategy. But his eyes sparkled when I mentioned old charges. That should have been red flag number 3. Weeks passed. Court dates shifted. Papers were filed. Money bled from my bank account. And then something changed. Subtle, like the faint smell of gasoline before an explosion. Fletcher stopped returning calls as quickly. He postponed meetings. He asked me to sign forms without explaining them. I've lived too long in a world where betrayal is an everyday language not to recognize its accent. The breaking point came one night at the clubhouse. I sat at the bar while the boys played pool in the back. My phone buzzed, a message from my ex's lawyer. Not my lawyer, hers. Just one line. We accept your attorney's revised custody proposal. Revised? My stomach turned. I opened the attached document. My breath stopped. The revised proposal gave full custody to my ex, stripping me down to supervised visits once a month, pending psychological evaluation. And the signature at the bottom was mine. Except I had never seen that paper before. The room around me spun. The club noise faded into rain on a distant window. Fletcher hadn't just failed me, he'd sold me out. My hand tightened around my phone until the plastic cracked. Rage slid through my chest, slow and cold. Not the wild kind that makes you swing at someone, the old kind, the disciplined kind, the kind I learned from brothers who weren't afraid to die but feared disrespect more than the grave. I rode to Fletcher's office that night. I didn't plan to hurt him, yet. I just needed to see something in his eyes. Confirmation, guilt, fear, anything that told me what he'd done. But when I got there, the building lights were off, his office empty, his desk cleared, like he'd vanished. But the world is small when you've lived on the outlaw roads. Too small for a rat like him to hide long. I leaned against my bike, staring at that empty office window, the wind cutting across my face, and right then, with the city humming below me, I understood something ugly and real. This wasn't a custody battle anymore. This was betrayal. This was war. And war is something I speak fluently. I didn't sleep the night I found out Fletcher stabbed me in the back. Men like me, men who've lived on the road, killed engines under desert moons, and buried brothers at dawn, we don't need much sleep anyway. But that night, I didn't want any. The anger kept me awake. The betrayal kept me sharp. The sun climbed over the industrial district like a dying bulb flickering on. I sat outside the old cannery, the unofficial meeting spot for club business, too sensitive for the clubhouse walls. My bike was still warm beneath me, coughing out the last breaths of its overnight ride. The world smelled like rust, oil, and coming violence. Before hunting Fletcher, I needed information. And information was a currency the Iron Serpents dealt better than any street cartel. A rook arrived first, thin as a matchstick, face tattooed with black wings that mirrored the ones on his back patch. He killed the engine of his Softail and lit a cigarette in the same motion, smoke curling around the grim smirk he always wore. "You look like hell, brother," he said. "Feel worse." He handed me a coffee that tasted like burnt tar and bad decisions. "Heard you've been asking around for a lawyer. Should have known a man of your past. Wouldn't trust a guy with a last name like Dane." I didn't smile. Couldn't. Not yet. "Fletcher forged documents," I said. "Sold me out to the other side. I need to know where he is and who he's tied to." Rook nodded slow, his eyes narrowing. "Family? Or club business?" "Personal." He didn't ask more. In our world, personal meant something that could turn into club business fast if blood touched the ground. Snake and DeVille showed up next. Snake with his limp from a bullet that never fully healed. DeVille with his polished boots and silver rings that caught the sunlight like miniature blades. They stood in a loose half circle around me, the way brothers do when they're ready to ride, fight, or bury something. Snake cracked open a manila folder thick enough to make my stomach drop. "We looked into your boy Dane. Thought we'd find a petty shark. Turns out he's swimming in deeper waters." I took the folder. Inside were printouts of bank records, screenshots of emails, and paperwork that looked too clean to be legal. Fletcher Dane was drowning in debt. Casino markers, private lenders, interest rates that could make a grown man cry. Worse, he'd been shifting client funds through a shell account labeled FD Consortium Services. A fake entity. A perfect hole to bury money he didn't want found. "Bastard was stealing from his own clients," DeVille said. "But here's the real kicker." He tapped one document. "A judge, Judge Marrow, had been taking meetings with Fletcher. Off the books, late nights, no clerks. Marrow, a hardline, old-school moral crusader who loved to lecture men like me about reforming. The kind of judge who'd look at my cuts, my patches, my history, and decide my daughter belonged anywhere else." "Fletcher's dealing with him?" I asked. Snake nodded. "Yeah, and guess what? Marrow's campaign is privately funded by a religious group that loves making examples out of sinners. I didn't need a translation. I wasn't a father in their eyes. I was a symbol, a demon leathered and branded, a cautionary tale they could parade in a courtroom to remind the world of their righteousness. Fletcher hadn't just betrayed me. He'd partnered with people who wanted to erase me from my daughter's life entirely. The anger inside me twisted. It wasn't the wild kind anymore. It turned into something colder, heavier, crystallizing in my chest like black ice. It made my breathing slower, my thoughts clearer. Rook flicked his cigarette. "What's the play?" "I go to the hearing," I said, "but not empty-handed." DeVille nodded. "You're thinking revenge?" I shook my head. "I'm thinking survival. Because in a courtroom, you don't fight with fists. You fight with proof. You fight with the truth sharpened into a spear. And the folder in my hands? It was full of spears, but I needed more. I spent the next 3 days tearing into Fletcher's life like I was dismantling an engine. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt. Every lie he'd told, every client he'd cheated, every meeting he'd had after dark, I hunted them all. I visited a bookkeeper who used to work for Fletcher, a pale woman with trembling hands and eyes that darted like cornered prey. It took time, patience, and a subtle reminder that not all threats wear leather and ride Harleys. Some threats are silent. Some simply walk away and let the wrong people think you talked. She broke within an hour. Fletcher forged more than my signature. He'd altered court filings, misreported client funds, and hidden evidence in previous cases. The man wasn't just corrupt. He was a goddamn landslide waiting to swallow anyone near him. On the third night, I sat at my kitchen table, empty beer bottles lining the counter, Mia's coloring book sitting untouched where she'd left it weeks before. I traced the outlines she made, soft little hearts and crooked stars. That's when the weight hit me. I'd lived through cage fights, midnight raids, bar brawls where bones broke like dry twigs, but nothing scared me like the possibility of losing her. Not death, not prison, not hell. Her laughter was the only sound that could calm the war inside my chest. I couldn't let a snake in a suit take that away. When I finally stood, the decision was solid as steel. I'd go to that courtroom ready for war. Not with fists, but with ammunition more dangerous. Truth, evidence, and the cold fury of a father pushed too far. But deep down, buried beneath layers of leather, scars, and old ghosts, another thought pulsed. If Fletcher tried anything else, if he even breathed wrong toward my daughter, then paper cuts would turn into knife wounds, and this time I wouldn't walk away. I walked into the courthouse that morning wearing the only suit I owned, black, stiff, and uncomfortable as a sermon. I hated the feel of it. Felt like wearing someone else's skin. But the courtroom wasn't a battlefield where leather and steel held power. Here men fought with paperwork and polished lies. So I dressed for their war. The hallway smelled like coffee, desperation, and fear. I'd walked into shootouts that felt friendlier. My boots clicked against the marble as I made my way toward courtroom 4B. Every step felt heavier than the last. Not because I was scared. I'd fought men who wanted my life more than my last breath. No, this was something different. Something colder. Something that squeezed behind the ribs and whispered, "If they take her, you'll never come back from it." I pushed open the door. People stared. They always stare. Once you've lived the outlaw life long enough, you can feel eyes like insects crawling over skin. But today, I didn't shrink from it. Didn't hide from the whispers. Let them look, let them judge. They didn't know me. They didn't know the nights I spent holding my daughter after her nightmares. They didn't know the years I spent trying to claw my way out of the past that everyone insisted was carved into my bones. My ex sat at the table to the left, wearing a neat blue blouse, hair pinned back like innocence itself. Her lawyer, Markson, kept whispering in her ear, glancing at me like I might explode. And then there he was, Fletcher Dane, my lawyer, the traitor, the man with a smile like a razor. Today he wasn't smiling. He looked thinner, paler, almost sick. His suit was wrinkled, his hair slightly disheveled. But his eyes, those cold little beads, still had that flicker of arrogance. The kind a man wears when he still believes he holds the winning hand. He walked toward me with forced confidence. "Elias," he said quietly, "glad you made it. Let's discuss." I stepped in close enough that only he could hear me. "You forged my signature," I murmured. "One more lie, and I'll make sure you lose more than your license." He swallowed hard. The color drained from his cheeks. "Good. Please, let's not be dramatic." "You don't know dramatic," I whispered, "but you will." The bailiff called the court to order before Fletcher could respond. We all took our seats. The judge entered. Judge Merrow, the moral crusader himself. White hair, stern eyes, mouth pinched like he'd been sucking lemons since birth. The kind of man who loved the sound of his own righteousness. He shuffled papers, cleared his throat, and began. "Mr. Grant," Merrow said, using my last name like it was an insult, "your past raises significant concerns regarding the suitability of custodial rights." I didn't flinch. I expected this. Markson stood. "Your Honor, the evidence of Mr. Grant's violent affiliations speaks for itself. The Iron Serpents are—" "They're a motorcycle club," I cut in, voice low but steady. "Not a church group, sure, but they're my brothers. They kept me alive. Straighter than the world ever tried to." Merrow frowned. "You will speak only when addressed." I sat back, quiet, for now. Fletcher finally rose, pretending to represent me, even though the sweat dripping down his temple told a different story. "Your Honor," he said, clearing his throat, "I believe a revised custodial arrangement may be more appropriate." He reached for his briefcase, the forged proposal, the one giving my ex full custody, the one he signed my name to. My heart slowed. Every muscle in my body tensed like coiled wire. Before he could open the case, I stood. "Your Honor," I said, voice booming across the silent room, "before any proposal is considered, I have evidence of misconduct. By my own attorney." Merrow's eyebrows shot upward. "Your attorney?" Gasps echoed. Fletcher froze mid-motion. I reached into my coat and placed the manila folder onto the judge's desk. Not aggressively, precisely. One move at a time, like defusing a bomb. "These are bank records, communication logs, and affidavits showing Mr. Dane has been engaging in fraud, including altering client signatures and falsifying court filings." Whispers filled the room like buzzing insects. Fletcher jumped to his feet. "This is outrageous. He's fabricating—" "Sit down, Mr. Dane," Merrow said sharply, his voice cracked like a whip. "Now." Fletcher sat. Markson looked rattled. My ex looked confused, unsure which way the wind was blowing. I continued. "I also have audio recordings of Mr. Dane discussing private meetings with Your Honor, alongside evidence of his financial involvement with parties opposing my custody." Merrow stiffened. "You'd better tread very carefully, Mr. Grant." "No threats," I said. "Just facts." He opened the folder. His eyes scanned the documents. His jaw clenched. A full minute passed. You could have heard a heartbeat drop. Finally, he looked up, at Fletcher first. "Mr. Dane," Merrow said, voice ice cold, "is there an explanation for this?" Fletcher's mouth opened, closed. Sweat trickled down his neck. For the first time since I met him, he looked small, weak, like the blade he'd sharpened finally cut his own hand. Your Honor, I can explain." "You will do so," Merrow snapped, "to the State Bar and a criminal investigator." Gasps again. Then Merrow turned his gaze onto me, but something had shifted. He didn't see a monster now. He saw a man standing against someone more corrupt than any biker. "Mr. Grant," he said, "until this matter is fully reviewed, the court will disregard all filings submitted by Mr. Dane. We will assess your custody petition on legitimate grounds only." My heart hammered once. Hard. Not victory, but a chance. My ex's lawyer scrambled to recover. Your Honor, surely we cannot proceed. We can, and we will. The hearing continued for 2 tense hours. Fletcher didn't look at me again. He stared at the floor like it might swallow him. I spoke softly, clearly, honestly. Not perfect. Not polished, but real. I told them about my past, my mistakes, my efforts to be better. I told them about Mia, about the nights she fell asleep on my chest, listening to the rumble of my motorcycle stories, about the way she hugged me like I was home, even when the world tried to paint me as a threat. When the hearing adjourned, the judge announced his decision would come soon. But the war wasn't over. As I stepped out of the courtroom, Fletcher grabbed my arm. His hand trembled. You ruined me, he whispered. I leaned in close, my eyes burning into his. No, I said. You ruined yourself. I just stopped you from ruining my daughter, too. He let go. Or maybe his hand just lost the strength to hold on. I walked out of that courthouse into cold, bright sunlight, the kind of light that exposes every ugly thing hiding in the dark. And I knew the next chapter wouldn't just decide custody. It would decide everything. The night before the ruling, I didn't touch my bike, my phone, or the bottle sitting on my kitchen counter, begging to be opened. I just sat in the dark, boots on the table, staring at the ceiling like it held answers I hadn't earned. The house was too quiet without Mia. Her little shoes still sat by the door, purple with worn-out white toes from dragging her feet on the playground. Beside them was her backpack, a faded unicorn slouching under its own broken zipper. I didn't move anything. Couldn't. It felt like touching those things would break me in ways no bullet or blade ever had. The road had carved me into a hard man. A man who could bury a brother without shedding a tear, who could stare down a barrel and not blink. But fatherhood? That was the only thing that ever softened me. And now it was the thing the world tried hardest to take. I closed my eyes, breathed, waited for morning like a man waiting for execution or freedom, never sure which one was coming. The courthouse felt different this time. Not colder, not warmer, just still. People moved around me, but the air didn't shift. It was like the whole building was holding its breath, waiting to exhale once the judge spoke. My boots carried me through the security gate. The guard nodded. Not friendly, just respectful, like he could tell something had changed in me. Maybe it had. Maybe yesterday had carved out the last piece of fear I'd been carrying. Inside courtroom 4B, my ex sat stiff, wringing her hands. Her lawyer avoided eye contact. They weren't confident anymore. They weren't sure the system was rigged in their favor. Good. Fletcher was nowhere to be seen, not allowed in the room today, not after the judge referred his activities to the district attorney and the state bar. The man who tried to destroy me was already drowning. I didn't need to push his head under. The tide was doing it for me. When Judge Merrow entered, the room silenced instantly. His face was carved from stone, but behind those cold eyes, something new flickered. Humanity? Regret? Hard to tell. I'd learned long ago not to trust any man wearing a robe or a badge, but today I didn't need trust. I needed truth. After reviewing the evidence presented, Merrow began, voice echoing across the small auditorium, it's clear that several filings in this case were fraudulent, submitted without Mr. Grant's knowledge or consent. Markson shifted uncomfortably. My ex leaned forward like she wanted to interrupt, but didn't dare. Merrow continued, it is equally clear that Mr. Grant has taken significant steps to distance himself from previous criminal influences and to build a stable environment suitable for a child. A shockwave hit my ribs. He wasn't done. Given the misconduct involved and the demonstrated commitment on the part of the father, the court awards, my hands tightened on the table edge. Joint custody to both parents, with primary residential custody alternating every 2 weeks. Supervision is unnecessary. My ex gasped. Markson slumped. But me? I didn't move. The words hit slow, like water soaking into dry earth. Not a full victory, not everything I dreamed, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to fight another day on equal ground. Then Merrow added, almost reluctantly, and I strongly encourage both parties to engage in structured co-parenting sessions to ensure the child's well-being. I nodded. I could do that. For Mia, I could face anything. Merrow's gavel fell. The sound echoed like the closing of a steel door, or the opening of a new one. Outside, the sky had turned a bruised gray. Storm clouds gathered but didn't break. Fitting. I stepped down the courthouse stairs, my breath misting in the cold air when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, hesitant, Fletcher Dane. He looked like a ghost wearing a man's body. Eyes sunken, lips pale, hands trembling as he clutched a stack of papers that no longer mattered. His voice cracked when he spoke. You ruined me, Elias. I exhaled, a long, tired breath. You did that yourself. He shook his head violently. I was trying to survive. You don't know the people leaning on me. You don't know... I stepped closer. He froze. Listen, I said quietly. I'm done with you. Completely done. You're not worth my fists. You're not worth my rage, and you damn sure aren't worth getting locked up again. He blinked rapidly. You're letting me walk? Yeah. A tear streaked down his face. Not a dramatic one, just the quiet kind of surrender a man feels when he realizes the world just stopped pretending to hold him up. But, I added, and he stiffened, you're going to live with what you did. Every day. Every night. You'll wonder when the next shoe drops, when your name hits the news, when the bar calls, when your debts come collecting. His breathing turned shallow. That's hell, Fletcher, I said. Not fire, not brimstone, just knowing a man you tried to destroy let you walk, but the world won't. He staggered back like he'd been hit. Then he turned and walked away, shoulders shaking, swallowed by the gray morning. I didn't watch him go. He didn't matter anymore. What mattered was waiting in the parking lot. A little girl with wild brown hair and a backpack twice her size running toward me. Daddy! Her voice was sunshine in winter. I knelt. She slammed into my chest with a hug, so fierce it knocked the world out of focus. I missed you, baby girl, I whispered into her hair, swallowing the fire swelling in my throat. I drew you something, she said, digging into her backpack. It's us on your motorcycle. And you're smiling, and I'm holding your jacket so I don't fall. I looked at the drawing. 2 stick figures on a bike, one big, one small, both happy. That's perfect, I said. Absolutely perfect. As I lifted her onto my hip, the storm clouds finally cracked open. Rain fell like hard truth on pavement. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel cold. I felt alive. I felt steady. I felt like a father again. When I strapped her into the car seat and started the engine, she leaned forward and whispered, Daddy, are we safe now? I looked at her through the mirror, eyes burning with something fierce and unbreakable. Yeah, baby, I said. We're safe, and no one's ever taken you away from me again. I drove off into the rain. No thunder behind me, no enemies in my mirror. Just the road, just my daughter. Just the kind of vengeance you can't see but feel deep in the bones. Justice. Earned. Signed and sealed.